Hey guys, tonight we're going to talk about something your brain is definitely already thinking about, even if you're pretending it's not. Picture this. You're just lying there, half asleep, maybe sweating a bit under the blanket, and your brain, bless its chaotic little heart, starts spinning a slideshow of questionable fantasies and awkward high school memories. And you wonder, why? Why this and why now? That's what we're sinking into tonight. Why humans just can't stop thinking about having sex. From brain chemistry to history's most inconvenient cravings, it's one of the oldest, stickiest mysteries about us. And spoiler alert, it's not just you. It's everyone. All the time. You probably won't survive this without giggling once or twice. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere cozy, drop your city and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where you guys are drifting off from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You don't wake up thinking, I want to contribute to the gene pool today, but that's the machinery grinding beneath your Monday. Your brain is wired to keep the species going, loudly, urgently, and with zero respect for your calendar. You're basically a monkey with Wi-Fi, and the monkey part is loud. See, the evolutionary blueprint you're dragging around is over 300,000 years old. It was designed for life on the savannah, not your inbox. Back then, survival wasn't guaranteed, and neither was reproduction. So, the human brain evolved shortcuts. Little dopamine-driven nudges. Triggers. Patterns. That feeling you get when someone attractive brushes past you? That's your limbic system going, hey, maybe this is the one. Make the babies now. This isn't romance, it's biology wearing a fake mustache. There's a chunk of your brain called the hypothalamus, about the size of an almond. Doesn't sound like much, but it's basically your body's horny switchboard. It controls things like hunger, thirst, and yes, sexual desire. When it decides it's go time, it floods your system with neurochemicals. Dopamine, testosterone, oxytocin, basically nature's version of a rave invitation. Now, mix that with 70,000 thoughts a day. That's the average number, by the way. And roughly every one of them is trying to sneak in a reference to sex like a bad improv actor. Is it your fault? Not really. Humans have evolved to prioritize sexual cues the way cats fixate on lasers. There's a classic example researchers love, the supernormal stimulus. In one experiment, scientists gave male birds the option between mating with a real female or a cardboard cutout with exaggerated features, bigger eyes, brighter feathers. Guess which one they chose? Yep, the dumb cardboard bird. You, my friend, are just a more complicated bird, surrounded by Photoshop, filters, and optimized algorithms designed to light up your primal circuits. Your brain isn't craving reality, it's craving the biggest possible reward for the least effort. Welcome to your own personal supernormal stimulus buffet. And this wiring is ancient. Fossils, cave paintings, and artifacts suggest prehistoric humans were just as obsessed. We're talking about 28,000-year-old figurines like the Venus of Willendorf, a 4-inch carved fertility symbol with exaggerated sexual features. Historians still argue whether she was a porn star, a goddess, or just someone's really ambitious art project. But the takeaway is simple. Even before words, humans were sculpting sex into stone. Fast forward a few dozen millennia and you're still built for this. But now, instead of saber-tooths and berry picking, you're juggling social media, awkward Tinder bios, and random thirst traps while trying to answer work emails. Your ancient brain just doesn't know what to do with all this availability. And here's the kicker. Even when you don't want to think about sex, your brain has its own plans. Studies show that sexual thoughts often emerge unconsciously, sometimes triggered by scents, images, or the subtlest hint of body language. The way someone laughs, stands, touches their own hair, these cues fire off signals like, might be fertile, might be safe, might be something. Of course, you try to reason with yourself. Don't think about it right now. That's adorable. But the second you suppress a thought, it gets stronger. It's called the ironic process theory. Try not to think about a white bear, and guess what's tap dancing across your mental stage? Sexy thoughts work the same way. Your brain isn't a vault, it's a toddler with access to cable TV. One fringe theory, though rarely taken seriously in academic circles, suggests humans might have evolved sexual overthinking as a byproduct of consciousness itself. Once we started contemplating the future, our mortality, and abstract things like love, sex wasn't just reproduction anymore, it became emotional, symbolic, even philosophical. Like, are you thinking about them, or are you thinking about how they make you feel about you? This is why sometimes just making eye contact with the barista launches a 6-part mental Netflix series starring you two as soulmates who raise goats in Tuscany. You weren't looking for a story, but your brain loves to narrate your hormones. And this goes deeper than you think. Literally, your brainstem, one of the oldest parts of your nervous system, plays a role in sexual arousal too. It's instinctual. It's reflexive. That's the same part of your brain that manages blinking, breathing, and basic survival reflexes. So next time you feel like you're being irrational for having thoughts you can't explain, just remember, it's not your logic failing. It's your plumbing overriding the power grid. But here's the weirdest part. Everyone's brain does this a little differently. For some, the triggers are visual. For others, it's scent, sound, voice, power dynamics, anything really. The spectrum is vast, and what lights up your brain might be completely invisible to someone else. That's what makes desire so strangely isolating and universal at the same time. Like, yes, everyone's thinking about it, but not in the same way. And that can make you feel like you're either completely normal or an alien wearing skin like a hoodie. But you're not an alien. You're just a human, wired to think about sex more often than water, taxes, or what you're supposed to be doing right now. And somehow, despite all this deeply ingrained biological drive, you still have to sit through team meetings, cook dinner, and try not to text your ex at 11:48 p.m. Good luck. And speaking of 11:48 p.m. texts, humans have been trying to behave for thousands of years, and mostly failing in creative ways. If you think modern society is especially obsessed with sex, try flipping back a few thousand dusty pages and you'll see that distraction is basically our oldest shared hobby. You wake up thinking about it. So did the pharaohs, the peasants, the popes. Let's time travel for a second. You're walking through ancient Mesopotamia, around 4,000 years ago. Clay tablets are being pressed with cuneiform, the earliest known writing system. And what are people scribbling down with all that world-changing technology? Love poems. Lusty ones. Like the Song of Inanna, where a goddess sweet-talks her lover using metaphors involving milk and plowing fields. Subtle? Not even close. If TikTok existed back then, it would have been flagged within seconds. Skip forward a bit and you'll find ancient Greeks basically turning sexual thought into philosophy. You'd sit in a stone amphitheater listening to someone like Aristophanes make jokes about, well, exactly what you're imagining. And Plato? The man wrote about love like it was a divine hunger, equal parts sacred and inconvenient. One of his dialogues even describes humans as once being two people fused together, split apart by the gods, forever yearning for their other half. Cute. And wildly dramatic. Even the Romans, famous for their roads and aqueducts, left behind graffiti in places like Pompeii that reads like Tinder profiles carved in stone. Stuff like, "I screwed the barmaid." Real Pulitzer material. So here you are lying in bed wondering if you're weird for being unable to shut off your thoughts. Meanwhile, some Roman guy 2,000 years ago was scrawling, "Virgula was here. She made me moan," onto a bathhouse wall. You're in good company. But this constant stream of libido didn't only show up in jokes or love songs. It twisted itself into daily life, power, and politics. Entire royal lineages were built or destroyed by bedroom behavior. Henry VIII, anyone? His libido led to 6 wives, multiple beheadings, and a brand new branch of Christianity. Historians still argue whether his obsession was strategic, hormonal, or just good old-fashioned panic about producing a male heir. Either way, his private thoughts had public consequences, ripping Europe in half and giving high school students centuries later something awkward to write essays about. And if kings were busy turning countries inside out over sex, monks were trying not to think about it at all, and discovering just how hard that was. In medieval Europe, monasteries were quiet places filled with prayer, fasting, and constant reminders to not imagine Sister Beatrice in candlelight. Some monks would literally flog themselves, yep, actual whips, to chase away sinful thoughts. One particularly dramatic Benedictine monk wrote that his lust was like a serpent coiled beneath his robe. That's one way to put it. There's even a fringe theory that monks would sleep on stone floors or freeze themselves deliberately just to suppress desire. Of course, this usually resulted in hallucinations, fevers, or even more intense visions. Turns out, freezing yourself just makes the brain weirder, not purer. But repression never works the way people hope. You try to bury it and it pops up dressed like a saint or a talking goose. That actually happened. There's a 12th century text where a monk claimed he was tempted by a demon who turned into a goose with seductive eyes. You really can't make this stuff up. Sexual thought isn't just persistent, it's incredibly adaptable. When it's banned, it sneaks into metaphors. When it's discouraged, it hides in poetry. When it's punished, it just finds a new angle. That's the thing, desire finds a way. Take Japan's Edo period. While samurai upheld a strict code of honor, there was also a thriving market for shunga, explicit woodblock prints. These weren't just underground stash. They were displayed in homes, gifted at weddings, and even used for education. Picture your grandma giving you a family heirloom scroll like, "Here's how your ancestors did it. Enjoy." And again, historians still debate whether Shunga was meant primarily for titillation, ritual, or just really intense storytelling. But either way, it shows that societies never really turn off sexual thought, they just repackage it. Now fast forward to the 19th century. You've got stiff collars, piano music, and everyone pretending to be polite. But even then, Victorian minds were buzzing. Sigmund Freud, the grandfather of psychoanalysis, believed that most of our problems came from repressed sexual desires. According to him, your dreams, slips of the tongue, and even random behavior were all just your libido playing charades. Of course, not everyone agreed. Freud's theories are now mostly cherry-picked or debunked, but the point stands. Even in a world of lace and table manners, people couldn't stop thinking about it. They just talked about it in whispers or used terms like hysteria to describe women who were, well, sexually frustrated. That's not a joke. There were actual Victorian doctors who treated hysteria by, let's just say, manually intervening until their patients were calmer. Science was going through a weird phase. But the most universal part of this entire history isn't just how often sex shows up, it's how it sneaks in. It disguises itself as art, hides in metaphors, or arrives wearing a suit and tie, pretending to talk about morality or virtue. But underneath, it's the same ancient impulse humming along, ignoring the dress code. And let's be honest, you do the same thing. You think you're daydreaming about a vacation, but your brain's quietly editing in a beach romance scene. You're watching a movie for the plot, and somehow the chemistry between two characters hijacks your whole attention span. It's not your fault. It's history repeating itself, one stray fantasy at a time. So tonight, as you try to settle your thoughts and stop your mind from drifting, remember, you're lying on the same mental highway that carried Sumerian poets, horny monks, scandalous kings, and bored Victorians. Everyone's been stuck in traffic here, and we're still building new exits. So, you've probably noticed by now, the more you try not to think about something, the more it gently insists on showing up. A passing image, a faint memory, a moment that stirs something in the background of your mind. This isn't new. Across time and continents, people have been wrestling quietly with that same sensation, that curious, persistent hum in the mind. Often, societies have tried to manage it, not by talking it through but by covering it up, by drawing lines, setting rules, and telling people that some thoughts simply shouldn't be there. And yet, there they are. Take belief systems, for example. In some traditions, certain feelings were seen as distractions, in others as tests. One well-known early thinker spent much of his youth in pursuit of pleasure before swinging hard in the other direction. He later became one of the most vocal advocates for restraint. He suggested that human longing was part of our imperfection, a kind of echo from a world we'd lost. And so began centuries of people not just trying to act modestly, but to feel modestly, to tidy up the inside of the mind, not just the outside. Easier said than done. In quiet communities across medieval Europe, men rose early, worked in silence, and devoted themselves to ritual and reflection. But now and then, someone would confess to a flicker of thought, an image, a dream, a memory, and worry what it meant. Some believed they were being tested. Others thought they were under spiritual attack. There are even accounts of visions involving, let's say, imaginative visitors. Once, a man claimed to be tempted by a talking goose with curious eyes. Scholars still debate whether this was a dream, a metaphor, or just the side effect of very little sleep. Trying to hide these thoughts often made them more elaborate. When something is off limits, it doesn't always disappear. Sometimes it lingers, reshaping itself into symbols, metaphors, or distant yearnings. In certain periods, like 19th century England, modesty became a kind of national costume. Clothing was layered. Conversation was careful. Even the legs of furniture were, in some circles, politely covered just in case someone got the wrong idea. It might sound quaint now, but it speaks to a broader impulse. The hope that if we manage the world around us tightly enough, maybe the world within us will follow suit. But the mind doesn't work like that. Writers of the time found clever ways around the silence. Emotions and longings were tucked into poetry, hidden behind flowers, glances, and rainy windows. Corsets and gloves, while symbols of restraint, often became quiet signals of something else. The more subtle the world became, the more the imagination filled in the gaps. There's a psychological term that describes what happens when someone suppresses a feeling so thoroughly, they begin to act the opposite. Not out of deception, but out of self-preservation. You see it when someone speaks loudly about virtue but their thoughts wander elsewhere. Or when a person avoids certain topics entirely, perhaps because they sit a little too close to home. And this doesn't only happen in dramatic places or times. Even today, many people grow up with mixed messages. Some are told that certain thoughts are inappropriate. Others are told not to feel anything at all until a certain time, or with a certain person, or under very specific conditions. But rarely are they taught what to do when a quiet thought simply appears, uninvited but not necessarily unwelcome. Research suggests that people who grow up with strict rules around inner life and emotion often struggle not because they feel too much, but because they were never shown how to navigate those feelings. So instead they hide, or panic, or feel guilty for something that was never truly in their control. Throughout history, whenever a society has tried to put longing in a box, the box eventually shakes. In Edo period Japan, where public order was highly valued, artists still carved and painted scenes of intimacy, not secretly but openly. These works were detailed, imaginative, and sometimes even used as wedding gifts or light-hearted instruction. They weren't always considered inappropriate. Sometimes they were just part of life. Scholars still debate the purpose of such works. Were they spiritual? Educational? Just decorative? The answer might be all three. Because, like anything else human, thoughts of closeness and connection rarely live in just one category. Even in traditions rooted in discipline, language often bends in this direction. One mystic from the 1500s described a spiritual experience as a moment of being pierced by divine light, so powerful it left her breathless. The way she writes, tender, radiant, overwhelmed, has made some readers wonder, was this only spiritual, or was something else being expressed through the only language she was allowed to use? Again, we don't know for certain. But that uncertainty is part of the point, because inner life doesn't follow the rules we try to give it. It moves sideways, shows up in dreams, and sometimes dresses itself in symbols so we can talk about it at all. The more we try to press it down, the more quietly persistent it becomes. So if, from time to time, your thoughts wander into soft or unexpected corners, don't be alarmed. You're not unusual. You're walking a well-worn path, one lined with poets, monks, artists, philosophers, and dreamers, all gently wrestling with the same quiet pull. And sometimes, the gentler the world around us tries to become, the more vivid that pull feels. It's late. The room is quiet. Your phone screen glows like a tiny lighthouse on your nightstand. You're not even touching it, but part of your brain already knows it's there. Just a tap away. Stories, images, voices, all designed to grab your attention. And many of them, subtly, or not so subtly, playing on that same ancient instinct. See, the part of your mind that once scanned forests for fruit, fire, or a possible partner. It's still scanning. Only now it's doing it through glass. Your brain hasn't evolved much in the last 10,000 years. But the world around it has, and it's moving at the speed of light. What used to be a fleeting glance across a village square is now an infinite scroll. And your mind, bless it, is still trying to process what's important, what's exciting, what might be a good idea. Whether it's social media, ads, or dating apps, the modern world functions like an endless buffet. And your instincts, sharpened over millennia, are sitting there with a plate in each hand, wide-eyed and slightly overwhelmed. You don't really want to think about certain things 24/7. But your environment is built to keep them circling in your mental orbit. Everything from shampoo commercials to action movie trailers seems to sneak in subtle cues, tilted smiles, well-lit skin, slowed-down glances. Your brain picks up on these even if you don't consciously notice. That's because your attention is guided by a reward system. When you see something that hints at connection or attraction, your brain releases a little burst of dopamine. Not because anything's happened, but because something might. It's the chemical equivalent of your brain raising its eyebrows and going, interesting. This mechanism helped your ancestors survive. It pushed them to be curious, to take social risks, to pursue relationships that might lead to security, support, or the continuation of their genes. But in today's world, it doesn't just get triggered by reality, it gets triggered by simulation. A filtered face, a whispery voice, a well-edited scene. Your mind can't always tell the difference between a real cue and a crafted one. There's a term used in neuroscience for this, superstimulus. It refers to exaggerated versions of natural signals, ones that your brain finds even more compelling than the real thing. Think of the bright colors in a bag of candy versus the muted tones of a fruit. Or the surreal glow of a photo with perfect lighting versus someone just sitting across from you at lunch. Your brain's instinct isn't to verify authenticity, it's to react. And that reaction is often tied, at least partly, to the potential for connection, closeness, or comfort. And here's the twist, you're not choosing these thoughts. Not really. Most of what drifts through your head is the result of subtle environmental nudges, combined with deep-rooted emotional memory. You pass a stranger in a cafe who wears the same perfume as someone you once loved, and suddenly your heart skips. You read a sentence that reminds you of a conversation you didn't want to end. These aren't fantasies, they're echoes. Now layer onto this the constant accessibility of content. You're scrolling, you pause, you notice something. You might not engage, but your brain files it away. The brief flicker of warmth or tension stays. And sometimes hours later, that image resurfaces, uninvited but somehow familiar. This is the modern mind, ancient software running on futuristic hardware. And sometimes the signals get crossed. You open an app to check the weather and end up wondering if you should text someone. You meant to watch a documentary and found yourself lost in a scene from a completely different kind of story. You're supposed to be resting, but a sentence from a show replays in your head, framed in a voice that made you feel seen for a moment. It's not weakness. It's pattern recognition. And it's incredibly human. Even things like loneliness, uncertainty, or boredom can heighten these patterns. When your brain feels unstimulated, it often wanders toward ideas that involve connection, meaning, or excitement, which, more often than not, are tangled up with attraction or intimacy. Not because you're shallow, but because those feelings are shortcuts to emotional clarity. They offer imagined closeness, however temporary, and that's something your brain always wants to investigate. And let's not forget, most of us spend our waking hours in highly structured environments, workflows, routines, inboxes. Your mind gets trained to focus, to organize, to perform. But underneath that, your emotional self is still humming along, slightly underfed. So when your attention finally relaxes, at night, in the shower, while commuting, it lets out a breath. And in that pause, softer thoughts start rising. A voice, a hand, a sentence that was almost nothing, a flicker of what? There's a theory, still debated among researchers, that modern overstimulation is making this mental loop even more persistent. With so many signals bombarding us, our brains latch onto the strongest emotional cues just to cope. And often those cues involve desire, not just in a physical sense but in the broader, more complex sense of wanting to be seen, touched, or remembered. You don't necessarily want a person. You want the feeling they triggered. That half-second spark. The idea that something real could unfold. Something that cuts through the noise. And ironically, in a world that keeps giving you more of everything, it's often that quiet, imagined moment that stays with you. So if your mind drifts, even when you're not trying to make it, you're not broken. You're just tuned into patterns. You're wired to notice connection, even in subtle, fleeting forms. And in the age of infinite input, it's no wonder those patterns loop more than ever. You're not chasing anything, really. You're just trying to make sense of a world that never stops offering you small, electric possibilities. You're in the car, maybe stuck behind a tractor or waiting for the microwave to finish its slow spin. The moment is blank. No real stimulation, just stillness. And what does your brain do? It wanders. A face pops up in your mind, or a moment, or a feeling. Sometimes it makes sense. Sometimes it's completely random. But there it is again. The flicker. It's not even about sex anymore, is it? That thought, that pattern, it's become something else entirely. It's a placeholder for possibility, for attention, for excitement in a life that sometimes runs on autopilot. It's the mind's quiet rebellion against routine. Because let's face it, most of your day is scripted. You wake up, you go through motions, you do what's expected. But in those little mental escapes, you aren't following a schedule. You're exploring. You're reacting. You're alive in a different way. Desire, at its root, isn't about action. It's about alertness. It's your brain whispering, "Hey, you're still here. You still want things. You still feel something." And that's oddly reassuring. Evolution built this into you. All of it. The reflex, the instinct, the sudden rush of curiosity. We needed it. Without that invisible nudge toward others, toward closeness, we might never have built anything. No families, no stories, no empires. No internet to scroll, no songs to cry to. No bedtime history to whisper in your ear tonight. Even now, after thousands of years, your mind is still playing the same tune. Only the lyrics have changed. Instead of mating dances around a fire, you're noticing someone's playlist. Instead of carved love poems on clay tablets, it's half-witted comments under someone's post that make your stomach flutter. Same longing, new medium. Historians still argue whether ancient people experienced desire the same way we do, filtered through ideals of romance shaped by pop culture, or buried under shame and self-awareness. But the feelings themselves? Likely just as tangled, just as persistent. A Roman widow might have stared at her laundry line and wondered what could have been. A samurai might have remembered a scent years later and felt his throat tighten. Same loop, different scenery. And here you are, standing in that same long line of wanderers, dreamers, quietly haunted people, folding laundry while arguing with a ghost from their DMs. Even aging doesn't dissolve it. Ask anyone in their 70s. Their knees may not want to cooperate, but their minds? Still busy, still wondering, still reaching for a spark, even if it's just a passing smile in a grocery store aisle. That's because this kind of thinking isn't only about biology, it's also about memory. Desire leaves footprints, not just in your body but in your timeline. Certain people, certain moments, they become bookmarks. Not because of what actually happened, but because of what almost did. And those almosts? They never really leave. Like that one person you never kissed, or the glance you didn't return in time. The message you deleted, then rewrote, then never sent. These aren't regrets. They're reminders that you're human. And that part of you is always slightly open, even when your eyes are closed. So what happens now? You can't shut the thoughts off. And honestly, you don't need to. The goal isn't to stop thinking about it, it's to understand why the thought was there in the first place. Sometimes it's just a flash of biology, a leftover spark. Other times it's a much deeper hunger. For closeness, for warmth, for someone to laugh with in a very specific way. It's not always about the person. Often it's about the feeling they represent. What they made you believe about yourself for a second. Or what you hoped you'd feel if they'd stayed. You don't need to act on it. Most of the time you won't. But you also don't need to feel strange for thinking it. Because you're part of a story older than language. You are the sum of chemical signals, missed chances, random neural associations, and a few songs that hit you too hard at 2 a.m. And yes, you will keep thinking about it. Because the world keeps changing, but the brain stays loyal to its little obsessions. The same way it fixates on warmth when you're cold or sound when you're lonely. It finds a pattern, then follows it like a child trailing a bird. Not to catch it, just to see where it might land. And now, slowly, as your breathing deepens and your limbs start to sink into stillness, you notice that thought beginning to dissolve. The flicker isn't gone, it's just quieter. Like a candle that knows when to dim. Your mind finally is preparing for sleep. You lie there, still and quiet, with only the soft hum of the room around you. Maybe there's a breeze brushing past the curtains, or the steady rhythm of a fan keeping time with your thoughts. Everything that felt urgent just minutes ago has softened at the edges, like ink fading into warm water. That flicker you carried in your mind? It's resting too. It's not gone, just folded neatly into the fabric of your dreams where it belongs for now. Your body is heavy in the best way, like it's being gently held by gravity itself. And your brain, ever the busy storyteller, has finally stopped flipping pages. There's no need to wonder or wish or reach. Not tonight. Tonight, your only job is to float. Let the thoughts drift without chasing them. Let the silence deepen without resisting it. Let the softness of this moment wrap around you like a favorite memory, one that asks for nothing in return, because you've thought enough for today. You've wandered, questioned, smiled at the oddities of your own mind, and now the stories can wait. You've earned a little stillness. So breathe in, slowly, deeper now, and exhale long and low. This is where the flicker fades, where the noise dims, where the world just for a while lets you go. Sleep well.